little help here, jet lag.
My son, every time we take my son out there.
Come on the other end.
Like every other kid that goes there.
Having some people, like, we're able to cover.
You're gonna start ringing your house. Sorry.
Sure. I spoke with you at the Parliament.
Yes. Of course, we were selling lots of
Yeah, well, there you go.
We're gonna start singing again.
Start singing.
We're gonna do a song, number 7 on the song list. It's one that's been was written by Ben Harper, who's a local boy, and it's called "My Own Two Hands." And you might remember it was featured on a commercial recently. It's a great song. I can change the world with my own 2 hands, make it a better place. With my own 2 hands, make it a kinder place. With my own 2 hands, with my own 2 hands, I can make peace on earth.
Thank you, Sherry Clay. In this last hour of the morning, we have Rosemary Radford Ruether, who will be responding to Catherine Keller. So in order of appearance, Catherine Keller. Welcome, Catherine. Catherine is professor of constructive theology at Drew University. Her theology, developed in many books, is literary, biblical, historical, cultural, post-colonial, postmodern, and process, among other things. She has kept theology alive in the broader intellectual discussion while maintaining an important and leading role among professional theologians. Her most recent book is Cloud of the Impossible, Negative Theology and Planetary Engagement. At our June Seizing an Alternative conference, she both organized a track on gender, race, and class and gave a section plenary address. Responding to her will be Dr. Rosemary Radford Ruether, an internationally acclaimed church historian, theologian, writer, and teacher specializing in the areas of women and religion. She's been a major voice in raising feminist critique of the traditionally male field of Christian theology, active in the early 1960s in civil rights and the peace movement. Later in the feminist movement, Ruether is thoroughly Catholic and radically reformist in her scholarly approach to various topics essential to religious discussion. Now retired from Garrett Theological Seminary, she is author of 36 books and over 600 articles on feminism, ecofeminism, the Bible, and Christianity. So she will be responding to Catherine Keller after we have a few words from Catherine. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, John, and greetings, everyone. I think that I see you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and you can see me?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, I feel I'm really almost there, and I'm so familiar with being there that I think this will work. So it's April Fool's Day, and and who is the real April Fool? Well, there was a good headline today in the New York Times, and it was about how we shouldn't be fooled, 5 different ways. And the image was a lovely graphic with a snowman melting in the middle of it, holding a sign saying, "The end is not near." And the article went on to say, don't be fooled by word that gets around that, for instance, climate change may have been on pause. The warming may have been on pause for over a decade. Point being that just because we may indeed have had a 10-year pause until a couple of years ago, or may not have, but even if we had this 10-year pause, that doesn't mean that climate change isn't happening, right? Don't be a fool and think so, because, you know, even if your car slows down to go over a speed bump, that doesn't mean that it is pausing in its advance down the road. So I thought that was a helpful headline for the day, that I'm trying to be, you know, very timely. So I picked up another magazine just out yesterday, and it's Der Spiegel. My German's kind of good. And, you know, it's a very smart, progressive, old magazine in Germany, Der Spiegel. I picked it up because the title article is Der missbrauchte Glaube, misused faith, and the subtitle, Die gefährliche Rückkehr der Religionen, the dangerous return of the religions. And it's a long, really intelligently written article about how religious is dangerous because it forms you, it shapes you. It shapes your very desires and aspirations. And it goes through multiple really scary scenario of religion returning. And not just in the form of ISIL, but we have an image of Putin, with the patriarch there. And up here we have Trump looking like he's preaching from a Bible, etc. So, and there's a big image in there of a whole congregation raising their hands in prayer for Trump's election in North Carolina. So, you get the picture. This is real. These are forms that religion does take. But I want to say, let's not be April Fools. Just because, indeed, so much religion does thwart the common good doesn't mean we should give up on religion. But I kept reading the article, looking frantically, scanning. It was a long article. For some reference to the other side of religion. Really, I was looking for some reference, at least in the last sentence, to Laudato Si. Nope. And that's a very familiar, good, smart perspective that comes from the left, isn't it? Just because so much religion is misused, any return of religion is dangerous. But here we are anyway, we're talking about Laudato Si. So I just want to say that Pope Francis is not the melting snowman, reassuring us that the end is not near. He writes in Laudato Si, doomsday predictions can no longer be met with irony or disdain. We may well be leaving to coming generations debris, desolation, and filth. And I, quoting from my piece on this, as Bruno Latour, the French and non-theistic philosopher of science writes, facing global warming, we need to paraphrase Dante at the gates of hell. Abandon hype, all ye who enter here. But this is not about abandoning hope, but optimism. Optimism might be the hope of, really an April Fool's hope of avoiding catastrophe altogether. But this more rigorous hope might be that we can turn catastrophe into catalyst. Or as John Cobb was saying, I think it was 40 years ago already now, I remember this from the walk outside somewhere there in your town. What we need is enough catastrophe to wake people up, and not so much that it's too late. Mm-hmm. What the Pope is calling this hope is hope for a new cultural revolution. The chance of an alliance between the environmentalists and the poor. That's a lot of people. That was poor to about the 99%. Of course, a revolution is bottom up, isn't it? But not purely. Top-down change for the common good can only be welcome too, hence the China project, which is not waiting for democracy to come to China and then for the people, to start voting on environmental issues. It's a hope for a more brusque and indeed top-down change. And an encyclical is pretty much the paradigm case of a top-down teaching with the authority of an unquestionable patriarchy, which I mentioned because my article is subtitled, One Feminist Response. And there is paragraph 75, all-powerful creator, father who alone creates and alone owns the world. So of course, to that paragraph, not just my feminist, but my process voice says, no, non sono d'accordo. But my eco-feminist, process, social justice, pluralist, political, theological voice, Horace is in these days to say, what matters is alliance for the common good. And really, all that patriarchy is pretty well concentrated in paragraph 75 out of 246 paragraphs. And, we just don't have time, do we? She says apocalyptically. We don't have time to achieve a harmony of political correctness. I'm thinking that we need a pragmatism of shared priorities. The clear papal priority is of heeding the cry of the earth and of the poor. It well serves such a pragmatism. And it also does so, I want to say, with deeply, if inadvertently, processed theological resonances. So it's, I think, just before paragraph 3 that you have that startling line in bold, right? Nothing in this world is indifferent to us. This just immediately made me start crying. This is not traditional Catholic creation theology. This does sound like the relation of all actual occasions in the universe, or it sounds like Griffin's pan-experientialism. Now, Francis in the letter also says, we need to strengthen the conviction that we are one single human family. That's not standard Christian family values. There are no frontiers or barriers, political or social, behind which we can hide. Still less is there room for the globalization of indifference. So that's what this no indifference is confronting, the globalization of indifference. Indifference, in fact, is, we might say, the lack of respect for difference. Indifference. The Pope writes in the encyclical, just as the different aspects of the planet, physical, chemical, and biological, are interrelated, so too living species are part of a network which we will never fully explore and understand. But part of our genetic code is shared by living beings. Tree of life is such an important image now. It follows that the fragmentation of knowledge and the isolation of bits of information can actually become a form of ignorance unless they are integrated into a broader vision of reality, which is why John has been teaching for so long about the danger of the fragmentation of knowledge in the contemporary university. So these different aspects that are all interrelated planetarily, including our genders, our sexes, I'm adding this to the Pope's list, races, religions, as well as species, are not washed out. All our issues are connected, entangled. I call it entangled difference. The common good, of course, is a phrase that worries a lot of intellectuals, as though it will be homogenizing or creating a kind of top-down unification. So we had a conference, I think it's already a couple of years ago, at Drew on this called Common Goods, in part to allay that anxiety. Here's the book, Common Goods. It's just out. Economy, Ecology, and Political Theology. I helped to edit it. I just want to, I think, read from my last paragraph in the book edited by Ignacio and John, and this will let me conclude. I don't show you that book. On still this meditation on indifference. Indifference is the opposite of difference. It conveys a world of separables and exploitables and expendables, blind and wasteful of the ways willy-nilly we recycle each other endlessly. And I pull together recycling and encycling. But there is no room for the globalization of indifference in the encyclical's House of Many Mansions, this complex homeostatic system, Gaia, sister mother, our body of bodies, this momentously encycled earth home. So, Laudato Si.
Thank you. So Rosemary has the next and first chance to respond.
Okay, I have a few remarks on Catherine's paper, which I enjoyed very much, by the way, and I really do not have a critique. I'm not going to stand up here and tear it apart because I really don't have any disagreement. But I have some things I want to lift up. Her paper, as you know, is called Encycling One Feminist Theological Response. So I think it's important that she has both of those words, feminist and theological. She opens her reflections with a paradox that climate change is coming both too fast and too slow. It's too fast, it's coming too fast to prevent irreversible destruction, but too slowly for us with our limits of attention to make it a top priority. It's kind of sad, huh? What is needed is to pay attention. Pay attention to this crisis in a new sense of a global public community and a way of bringing us together in our interconnections. And this is a key reason why she calls her response feminist, but not just feminist, but also theological. The language of theology can assist in creating what must be a universal call, a call that involves us all. She also sees churches as mostly ignoring of the issues, but paradoxically, she sees it as important that this call comes from the Pope, the head of a very big church, a worldwide membership, and only the Pope, she suggests, can reach a global public and force people around the world to pay attention and to study this encyclical worldwide. The Pope's own remarks combine this slowness and rapidity of the issue, bringing together both a slow reflection and rethinking of the planetary crisis that we are a part of, but also calls the whole human community to think of themselves as one family. Now, for feminists, as Keller suggests, the language of family is always a little ambivalent with its echoes of patriarchy and male domination and hierarchy, and yet she seems to accept the term. You can critique that if that's not true. She seems to accept the term family because it calls us to all come together in our complexity and our differences together. Most importantly, the Pope calls us to bring together two crises that are often disconnected: the environmental crisis and the crisis of poverty that afflicts so many human beings. For Pope Francis, these two crises must be seen together. For those most hurt by the environmental crisis are, in fact, the poor. It's they who starve when the soil is made infertile, when the waters are made toxic and kill the fish, and so on. For the Pope, we must hear the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth together. And this calls for new alliances, new interrelationships. For the Pope, the humans are called by the God of creation not to dominate the earth in the sense of exploiting it, but to care. And that's been lifted up in other talks, that the metaphor here is not dominion, but care for creation, to till the earth in a way that nurtures it. And this means bringing us all together despite and even in our differences that must also be recognized as our interdependencies. So Keller concludes by playing on the meaning catastrophe. Catastrophe. The climate crisis threatens us as a catastrophe, that is a disaster, but the etymological meaning of the term catastrophe is to turn down, restore, or bring down our relationship into a relationship with the earth and with each other. So this is, I think, an insightful reflection on Pope Francis' encyclical on the climate crisis.
Thank you. Catherine, do you have a few words of response?
Oh, very few. Thank you, Rosemary. That was beautiful. And I'm glad that you didn't need to cut it shreds because we don't have time. I just want to say, yes, actually, the way Pope Francis is using the term family, I just want to underscore, for me, it echoes Jesus' sort of anti-family use of the term family. His true family is my mother, my brothers, my sisters are these here listening to me preach. It's a deep repudiation of any fixation on the heteronormative nuclear family already anticipated in the gospel. And I think whenever we radically expand family to the human family, it's an alternative again to that heteronormative unit that so well fits into a lot of reactionary religious and social policies. So a family of radical difference. I guess I just want to say that at least at this point in my life, this mature point, I just had another birthday. And they just keep on coming. Really. This also means theological difference, So I realize I'm actually glad that the Pope has that one rather patriarchal paragraph 75, because that's a hook. I found this worked this way actually in my intro to theology class, where I have a lot of students coming out of the inner city churches and quite evangelical. And patrocentric in their theology. And this was a hook for them to trust the wider, more radical vision, So even some patriarchal theology in small doses can actually open the way. And if anyone has problems with that, of course, you should read John Cobb's Jesus's Abba, which will help you meditate on the Papa question. But I don't want to get distracted. I was trying to name the feminist theological issues just briefly in order not to be distracted by them. But I hope we have some time for some other questions or just comments.
Yeah, now we have 5 minutes left for comments or questions for Catherine. Do I see hands for Catherine? Yes, Philip.
Catherine, hi, this is Philip. Could you extend the family metaphor, which is maybe the most controversial part of what you just said, especially I've never heard you affirm patriarchy before.
Oh, it's April Fool's Day, remember?
To all living things, there's openings in your last book, there's openings for you as a process thinker. There's an invitation there for you. How far would you go? How big is our family?
Oh, further than you think. I think you want to take it down to all living beings. And I probably wouldn't. Right. Just those biological creatures. I want to take it down to the quanta. So really, at some level, I think I'm very doctrinally Whiteheadian in the sense of our being actually interrelated with all actual events of existence, everything that we could call a creature, even those quantum events. And I think that family just means being related, right? The condition of being related. So
other
family all the way.
comment or question for Rosemary's response to Catherine?
Well, I guess I
Yeah, Bonnie.
I'd like to just say to Catherine, I really appreciate your lifting up this good purpose for this patriarchal paragraph. I think that is that will help me see the good in lots of patriarchal conversation that I haven't seen before. So I think that's very profound. And I do think our diversity is a great challenge for us to widen our scope of what family is. And in family, we certainly do include people who are not like us and don't think like us and have different ideas than we do. That's what we are to learn in a family. That's what you inevitably learn growing up with parents and siblings. So thank you for that. That's very helpful.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. And that lets me say, of course, we might extend our families, indefinitely in some sense to include all the creatures of our worlds. But as we know in our own nuclear families, even, it doesn't mean we're equally close to all of them, or that we're like all of them, or that we can communicate with all of them. We know, I think, that very painfully in our families. And so it's important, isn't it, when we're working with a process paradigm, not to fall into an easy romanticizing of relationality, of which I can always be accused. And so I defensively now learn to say in advance, right, relations are good, evil, and indifferent. They don't go away. Even divorces don't make them go away, do they? Well, what you're wanting to diminish and get free of in a bad relationship, to an abusive spouse, or to an abusive economic global structure, doesn't stop affecting you just because you refuse to continue in the same relation to it. You don't stop being in relation to any of these negative forces, but you can radically shift the mode of relation, and that involves often disidentification. And just a final word, I think I have a minute, about using more conservative theologies, which are always in some way patriarchal. This has just become crucial to me at Drew, because we have such a commitment to cultural and racial diversity. And our commitment to racial diversity in particular means that we bring in students, as I mentioned, from a lot of the inner city zones of the greater metropolitan area. And those theological contexts are usually conservative in terms of the actual Christian confession. And so it's been a deep discipline for me to learn in the introductory class that I teach, that a lot of students are in just because they have to be in it. When we start that sentence, it's been a crucial discipline for me to learn a practice of kind of unconditional respect towards the theologies of my students, and it took a long time to outgrow some of my younger feminist habits in that way, and that's been very rewarding because it makes me a much more dangerous feminist. I'm actually very successful in converting most of my evangelical students, not out of their evangelical identification, not out of their communities, but converting them to ecological and feminist and sexually just modes of Christian theology, right? They're usually already open to issues of race and class justice. I don't have to do so much work on those fronts with my more evangelical students. But because I have learned to be a little more compassionate with the patriarchal carryovers, the transformation is much more dramatic. And the Pope in this is very skilled.
So let's thank Catherine. And now we'll start again with Rosemary's presentation.
Okay, I'll say a few things about my section. This little article, by the way, I wrote when the encyclical first came out, really before this book was spoken about, and so I just flipped it right off to John when he asked for it. I'd already written it. Pope Francis' encyclical on care for creation, of course, explores the radical edges of the issue of responsibility for creation in the light of the current damage to nature by modern culture and technology. And he addresses this encyclical on creation to every person living on this planet. So I think that's significant. That's following a line, I think, of more recent papal encyclicals who used to always simply address the bishops who were then supposed to inform the dopes under them and so forth. But that really has changed to the sense of addressing the whole human family. And I think the Pope is very clear that he particularly wants to address the whole human family. All human beings are called to be concerned for the well-being of creation. And I want to enter into dialogue with all people about our common home. So there's no effort to restrict this to a Catholic audience, very much the opposite. He then turns to what's happening on the earth, how the lands and the oceans are being polluted, but particularly how the devastation to the planet particularly affects the poorest of human beings. So this is, I think, a very important stress, and very important for him personally, that these two things be brought together, the devastation of the earth and the devastation how this affects the poor. Francis analyzes climate change as a global problem with grave implications for environmental, social, economic, political, and distribution of goods, and again the implication for the relationship of environmental damage and poverty. And he always lifts up the earth as though it was, in fact, speaking to us, that this environmental damage has caused the earth to cry out. So this sense of the earth crying out, pleading with us to take a different course. And he seeks to create a new culture for dealing with the issues by appealing to the gospel of creation, that all human beings are created in the image of God, and creation was created very good. And human dominion is given for the purpose of caring for creation and bringing the earth itself to fulfillment as very good. So he concludes really with a kind of, I think, somewhat of a departure from traditional theology in talking about not only human beings as culminating in a kind of union, a resurrected union with God, but that we are to care for the earth in a way that also brings the earth itself into a resurrected glory and union with God. Now, I want to sort of raise the question of what in the world does that mean? What does it mean to talk about the earth as that through our care for it, we are bringing the earth into communion with God? And I would like to suggest that the earth doesn't need us to be brought into communion with God. The earth is already in communion with God and would be so even if we had never arrived at all. So I have some questions about the need of human beings to bring the earth into communion with God. So that's and of course I also agree with other critiques that have been made about the lack of attention to birth control and the role of women and so forth. Okay, that's my comments on my talk.
Catherine, could you hear all that? And do you have a few words of response?
Yes, I sure do. Thank you. So I realize that I am not actually privy to the inner life of Catholicism, but from my outsider perspective, one thing is very clear. Rosemary Radford Ruether is the prophet crying in the wilderness who prepared the way for Francis' encyclical. Yeah. Now,
I'm not sure
Rome may not have fully recognized it. But she, as a Roman Catholic, an interreligious, ecumenical Roman Catholic, is not just the leading global voice of ecofeminist theology of whatever religion. She is no doubt the most influential of feminist theologians, and on the authority of a good Protestant thinker, Gary Dorian, she is one of the two leading North American theologians, period. The other one, well, right, you guessed it. He's in the front row there. And he's just a few books ahead of her 36 books, but she's 10 years younger. I don't mean to be offering praise here, but to be saying something about a force field of influence that is evident and evidently, therefore, prepared the way of this Pope. And so it isn't that she just got human destruction of planetary life, human and not human. She got it before almost everyone, except John Cobb. And this was manifest in a book that was important to me when I was in seminary, 1975, New Woman, New Earth. And her God and Gaia in 1992 was again precocious in applying the Gaia hypothesis of Margolis and Lovelock to theology back before that was at all respectable to do. Now, even a confessional Protestant theologian like Moltmann is using the Gaia hypothesis. And I think I just want to read a paragraph actually from my most recent book, the ecologically focused chapter that is relevant here. If I wrote there, if Gaia now with Moltmann becomes the space for the encounter and cooperation of the world religions, the old world religions will need to outgrow their otherworldly and unearthly emphases and convert to the earth. And he knows who he's quoting. In this way, local wisdom can be transmitted across the post-industrial world. And I write then, 3 decades earlier, Rosemary Radford Ruether had called for the conversion to the earth. Perhaps its time is coming. In God and Gaia, the call to an ecofeminist theocosmology of Gaia is, of course, not a call away from any religion, but to the practice of planetarily sustainable justice. Ruether has never ceased simultaneously to bring theology into interreligious conversation. The explicit relationalism of feminist theology in Christianity and Judaism has from the start lent itself to religious multiplicity with naturally special interest in some of the less anthropomorphic traditions with goddesses. Ruether's partners have often been women embodying multiply jeopardized populations within traditional as well as so-called world religions. These local wisdoms have, of course, been badly tattered by colonization, conversions, commodifications, like like Gaia herself has been tattered, the earth. And I read this because I wrote it before the encyclical was quite on its way. And I want to say that it's characteristic of a radical, really radical humility that Rosemary does not in her essay on the encyclical mention that she was calling for the conversion to the earth so long before then the encyclical does it. That she doesn't even mention the feminist issues with Rome in the encyclical piece is evidence of her own sense of pragmatic alliance for the common good. And anyways, and all those other things. And now I'll just read from the last paragraph of her piece. Francis concludes by calling for an ecological conversion of humanity. This conversion needs to happen on the level of individuals and local communities, but also globally. Not just humans, but all creation is incarnational. All created things manifest the divine. God is present in the whole universe. Humans need to convert their consciousness and way of life to the care for creation, leading it in themselves to that fulfillment in resurrected glory, in union with God. Amen. I just want to say thank you for preparing the way, and perhaps someday Rome will thank you too.
Thank you, Catherine. We have about 16 minutes for comments, questions, discussion, concerns.
He hasn't invited me to lunch yet.
I won't be shocked when he does.
First Sherry and then Mark.
Rosemary, I'm just wondering if, I certainly agree with you that the earth does not need us to bring it into communion with God.
Right.
But I'm wondering if there's a way in which, maybe I'm thinking like in a Teilhardian sense, that we might be like the way that Jesus brought together matter and spirit, divine and human, that there might be a way in which humans can consciously bring together a communion between the earth and God in ourselves, and that in a Teilhardian sense that kind of goes somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think not being in communion with God is our problem, not the earth's problem.
Right.
So we need to do a little work on ourselves for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the idea that the earth joins us in a kind of resurrected, I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to mean. I think the earth likes to be where it is. I don't think it wants to rise up into resurrection glory.
So Mark Dibben.
I'm going to ask a question that is straight from the heart and straight in response to your point about this issue of the earth being in communion with God, and the fact that it doesn't need us to be involved in that for it to be in closer communion with God. And my immediate response to that was that perhaps we have actually acted as a result of our ignorance to so damage the earth as to take it further away from a communion with God. And if that was the case, how would you respond to that in terms of us as a species and our relation with God?
Well, yeah, that's, I think, a very important aspect that certainly the human history has been one of damaging to ourselves, damaging to each other, and to the earth. And so there has been an enormous violence to nature that has come about through human activity. But again, that's a problem for our relationship to God and the need to and perhaps really caring for the earth and caring for animals and so forth, and really converting ourselves from these violent relationships can be a way of restoring our relationship to God as well, at the same time, our relationship to nature.
Other questions, comments? Catherine, I'm going to ask a question. In my notes, I wrote pragmatism of shared priorities, not political correctness. Can you say anything more about the possibility of setting to one side our concerns, our disagreements, our ideological polarization, just in order to focus on this one family, one earth, one life that the Pope is talking about?
Well, I think I'm talking about something very like, Rosemary's whole project, which just continuously, arduously, and yet so lucidly interweaves the multiple issues that both join us and tear us apart. So insisting on always working on issues of ecology in relation to the situation of poor women in the Southern Hemisphere, for instance. But it's a project that never pretends that therefore we in the North with advanced degrees are living the same reality as those women in the South struggling to make ends meet, and often nonetheless leading local ecological movements. So it seems to me that she's just a model of the kind of pragmatism that I'm talking about that has no formula because it relinquishes the commitment. What I can caricature as political correctness, but that's too easy. It relinquishes the commitment to a satisfying agreement with the radical edge of my most current thinking, right? That's actually what I usually have to back off from if I'm going to communicate with someone who's not already there. I have to back away from some radicality, some progressive commitment that I believe in deeply. I don't back away in the sense of disavowing, but in the sense of entangling with a related perspective. So I think we really have to have a clear sense of priorities in order to make these decisions about where we can back down in a particular conversation. Because it's not just a matter of being nice. It does use the skill of turning the other cheek. Yes, it puts loving enemies to a new political test. But it isn't about kindliness or inclusiveness. Fundamentally, it's about building an adequate planetary alliance. So being able to keep clear with our priorities seems to me to be the key. And the Pope has very effectively, I think, named the priorities of the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, the planetary and the poverty theme. That's certainly a way of naming it. And we'll have all slightly different ones, but I'm very closely there with a sense that finally it's a matter of the ecological, and it's the ecological system as abused now by the global economic system that serves as the priority, that if someone's on board with that, then I can, or if they might be onboardable with that, then I can relinquish some of my other pet issues around an articulation of feminist or queer themes, not backing off of any of it, but remembering the priority that we're working for. But anyway, this is very hard because I also fully bless and support, for instance, the Black Lives Matter movement. And, you can't just say, yes, but all the lives of the planet also matter, because that then washes out the particular priority that is arising for that population. So I think these are probably negotiations that require a kind of political work of the Holy Spirit and a faith that actually all of these vital concerns of justice are deeply interrelated.
Interrelated, yeah.
You have a response?
Yeah, I first began to think about ecological questions in 1972. And I read in the I was teaching at Howard University School of Religion, which of course is a historic Black university. And I was very impressed by that. I realized that if I was committed to social justice, and particularly in terms of my relationship to the Black community. I had been involved in civil rights things in Mississippi and so forth. And so I remember trying to present this issue of ecology to my class at Howard, which was primarily Black males. I mean, there weren't too many women who managed to get there at that point. And they were completely uninterested. And so basically I realized that I had to really do a much better job of connecting these things if I was to be able to talk about the issue of ecology in the context of what was not yet called Black Lives Matter, but that's what they were concerned about.
Was economics often a key there, the class connection?
No, it was race. The issue was race.
between race issues and
Yeah,
and
but
ecology.
the Black males at Howard were not the poorest of Blacks.
Right.
We have a question.
Yeah, I just think that people in the room need to be also aware that there was a Black Lives Matter delegation to the Paris conference in December, and that they were part of the NGOs who were advocating for the earth. So there are people in ethnic communities, not just in white, Western, Northern hemisphere, that are saying this is our issue. This is about all of us.
Absolutely.
I saw John Forney.
PS on that, may I just quick PS?
John Forney had his
Okay,
hand.
then yeah.
I think that's an important thing to stress, because if you look at where we have had ecological disasters, which is the last community that gets assistance? The Ninth Ward is still not cleaned up in New Orleans. There are parts in New Jersey that are still suffering from the
In East LA.
effects of Hurricane Sandy.
Vernon.
And so the fact is that my community is always going to get fixed up first. Wall Street got fixed up first.
Now Ignacio.
Yeah, there's an African-American gentleman that has become part of our Pando group. His name is Kwasi Nkrumah. I don't know if you know Kwasi Nkrumah. And he is constantly bringing up this issue, and that's one of the wonderful things that can happen and hopefully will happen through Pando, that we will integrate more of the ethnic groups that have been aware of that. Of the 60-plus groups that were at that meeting that John mentioned in his opening statement, several of them were from the ethnic community, and I think that there's going to be even more now that more stories are coming up, like he was just saying East LA, the whole the battery factories that refuse to close for years and years and burn on and on and on. And that's just in the LA area. Imagine all over the US and beyond.
Bonnie.
Yeah, I just want to ask Catherine, Dr. Ruether, Dr. Cobb also, what ways have any of you as theologians offered this book or any of your recent ecologic theologic works to the Pope personally?
Yeah.
I guess John has an answer.
Well, we have a friend by the name of Ron Phipps.
He's listening, John. He's on the line.
Oh, what'd you say?
He's with us electronically right now.
Okay.
Ron is.
Well, if you can address him, go ahead. Anyway, Ron Phipps had a friend who was very close to the Pope. And according to Ron's report, the copy has gotten to the Pope.
That's right.
That does not mean he has seen it. We don't know.
He's
He did read
reading it.
Naomi Klein.
That's right.
That's right. He had read Naomi Klein, and he included her
Oh.
in the advisors when
Naomi
the
Klein, he has a
encyclical
real
was
relation.
announced.
Yeah.
That was like amazing.
Yeah.
We have 2 minutes to go. Catherine, Rosemary, do you have a last word?
Not a last, I hope, but let me just mention that, of course, the process community has been important in fostering some of this crucial and sometimes challenging interchange, right, between issues of ecology and race. And I'm just, thinking of the importance of the eco-womanist voices of Monica Coleman, of Karen Baker Fletcher, made very explicit these interrelations in ways that I think are incredibly promising for the larger global coalitions that Naomi Klein also is very hopeful about, the fact that both capitalism and climate change need to be fought simultaneously. It could seem like too much, it overwhelms us, but her point is no, that's what should give us hope, because the potential for an immense planetary coalescence is there because of that dual depredation becoming more and more manifest. Partly through the work
when
of this.
I said that my black male students at Howard weren't immediately responding to the ecological issue, you have to remember that's 45 years ago. And so there has been a lot of development since that time in really connecting these things and finding ways to connect them. But what I realized is in 1972 is that I had to do a better job of connecting them.
About 30
But even
seconds. 30 seconds, Catherine.
Even if the connections, are understood in the mode that womanists have called intersectionality, for decades, or simultaneity of the multiple issues, it's going to be the case that there are these immediate flashpoints, these modes of high-speed emergency, terror in Europe, another police assault on an African-American man, et cetera, that are going to require a dramatic attention, and then one has to back off, from the other intersections for a pause, and then I think the intersections flow back in all the more effectually. But I think we need to get very skilled at the sort of movement between these fast action events that preoccupy us, often politically, and this strange slow speed of global warming that I appreciate Rosemary having also pointed to.
Well, thank you for coming to us from. Thank you, Rosemary, as well. We're adjourned for an hour and a half for your lunch break. Lemon Tree, Wolf's Market, downtown.
Well, Lemon Tree does have vegetarian and meat lasagna served downstairs and plenty of it. So they've encouraged you, if you want, lunch downstairs is available.
You are encouraged to visit the Lemon Tree.
Good morning. Good morning. And you actually